What would you do to save your father's life? Would you marry a stranger? Would you sell your future to a man you've never met? That's exactly what Elena did. But here's the part that will keep you up at night. The billionaire who bought her? He'd been watching her for 3 years. He didn't just take advantage of her situation. He created it. Stay until the end because this story, it's not what you think. Elena noticed him before he noticed her. That was the thing she would remember years later, when everything had already changed, when the weight of his ring pressed against her finger like a secret she never asked to keep. She noticed him first. The charity gala was suffocating in its elegance, crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across 300 people who wore their wealth like armor. Elena didn't belong there. Her dress was borrowed from Carrie, a deep emerald gown that her best friend swore made her eyes look like honey in sunlight. Her heels were one size too small. Her smile was rehearsed. She was there for her father. Always for her father. Richard Vasconcelos stood near the bar, his faded blue shirt hidden beneath a rented tuxedo, making desperate conversation with men who had already decided he was invisible. Once, he had been one of them. Once, the Vasconcelos name meant something in this city. Now it meant debt. It meant failure. It meant a daughter who worked 2 jobs while pretending everything was fine. Elena watched him from across the room, her heart a tight fist in her chest. He was laughing at something. That hollow laugh she had learned to recognize, the one that meant he was drowning but still trying to float. That was when she felt it. Not a touch, not a sound. Just a shift in the air, a sudden awareness that made the skin at the back of her neck prickle with heat. Someone was watching her. She turned. And there he was. Nathan Blackwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittering behind him like he owned every light in the city. Maybe he did. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her apartment's yearly rent. No tie. The collar of his white shirt opened just enough to hint at the hollow of his throat. His black hair was swept back from a face that seemed carved for severity, all sharp angles and controlled stillness. A thin scar cut through his right eyebrow, the only imperfection on a man who looked like he had been engineered for power. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Blue-gray, the color of winter oceans, of storms approaching from the horizon. Cold, assessing, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. He didn't look away when she caught him staring. Most men would have. Most men would have offered a sheepish smile, a polite nod, some social nicety to smooth over the moment. Nathan Blackwell did none of those things. He simply held her gaze as if he had every right to it, as if she was something he had been waiting to find. Elena felt heat climb up her neck. She should look away. She should turn back to the crowd, find her father, remember why she was here. But something in those stormy eyes pinned her in place, a challenge she hadn't agreed to but couldn't refuse. 3 seconds. 5. 10. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, something more dangerous. Something that said he knew exactly what effect he was having and felt no need to apologize for it. Elena broke first. She turned away, her pulse hammering against her throat, and disappeared into the crowd before she could do something stupid like walk toward him. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know that he had spent the last 2 years learning everything about her. She didn't know that her father's debts hadn't happened by accident. She didn't know that the man with the winter eyes had orchestrated this entire evening, every detail, every carefully placed coincidence, just for the chance to stand in the same room as her. All she knew was that her hands were trembling, and her borrowed dress suddenly felt like it wasn't enough armor for whatever war had just begun. 3 weeks later, he came for her. Elena was at the hospital when Nathan Blackwell walked into her life with a proposition that would change everything. Her father lay in the bed by the window, smaller than she had ever seen him, tubes threading in and out of his arms like he was more machine than man now. The heart attack had come without warning. The bills had come faster. She was sitting beside him, holding his trembling hand when the door opened and a man in a dark suit stepped inside as if he had been invited. Elena stood immediately, her body moving between the stranger and her father before her mind caught up. The man from the gala. She recognized those eyes instantly, that predatory stillness, the way he occupied space as if the world had been built specifically to accommodate him. "Visiting hours are over," she said, her voice harder than she felt. Nathan didn't acknowledge the words. His gaze swept over the room, over the medical equipment and the flowers wilting on the windowsill, and the father who had once been a titan and was now just a fragile man in a hospital gown. When his eyes returned to Elena, something flickered there, something that almost looked like pain. "Your father owes $14 million, he said quietly, to 3 different creditors who are running out of patience. His company is gone. His properties have been seized. In approximately 6 days, he will be arrested for fraud charges that carry a minimum sentence of 15 years. Elena's blood turned to ice. "How do you—" "I know everything, Miss Vasconcelos." He took a step closer. She held her ground. "I know that you dropped out of Juilliard to take care of him. I know that you work as a waitress at a restaurant in Brooklyn and as a piano teacher on weekends. I know that you sold your mother's jewelry last month and cried in your car for an hour afterward." "Stop." The word came out broken. "I also know how to make all of it go away." Another step. They were close enough now that she could smell him. Cedar and something darker, richer. The debts. The charges. Your father's future. Behind her, Richard stirred. "Elena? Who is—" "It's no one, Dad." She didn't turn around. She couldn't look away from those winter eyes. "What do you want?" Nathan reached into his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box. Black. Simple. He opened it without ceremony. Inside, nestled against white satin, was a ring. Not a diamond solitaire. Not the gaudy display she might have expected from a man who wore his wealth so openly. This was different. A deep blue sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds in an antique gold setting, delicate and old-fashioned and utterly beautiful. It looked like an heirloom. It looked like it meant something. "This ring has been in my family for 4 generations, Nathan said. "My great-grandmother wore it, then my grandmother, then no one, because my mother wasn't worthy of it, and I never found anyone who was." His eyes held hers. "Until now." Elena stared at the ring, then at him. "You're insane." "Probably." He didn't sound bothered by the accusation. "But I'm also offering you a way out. Marry me. Give me 1 year. In exchange, your father walks free. His debts disappear. You'll never have to worry about money again." "And what do you get?" The question hung between them. Nathan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I get you." Elena said yes. Not because she wanted to, not because she believed a single word that came out of Nathan Blackwell's perfect mouth. She said yes because her father's hand was trembling in hers, because the medical bills were piling up like accusations, because she had learned long ago that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. The wedding happened 4 days later. No guests, no flowers, no music. Just a courthouse in Lower Manhattan, a judge who looked bored, and Marcus Chen standing as witness with an expression that suggested he had seen Nathan do strange things before, but this might be the strangest. Elena wore a simple white dress she had found at a thrift store the day before. She hadn't told Carrie. She hadn't told anyone. This wasn't a wedding. It was a transaction. Transactions didn't require witnesses who would cry and ask questions she couldn't answer. Nathan stood beside her in a navy suit close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. When the judge asked if he would take this woman, his voice was steady, certain, as if he had been waiting his entire life to say those words. When it was Elena's turn, she hesitated. 1 heartbeat. 2. Nathan's hand found hers. Not grabbing, not demanding. Just there, warm and solid, his thumb brushing once across her knuckles in a gesture so unexpectedly gentle that she almost forgot to breathe. "I do," she said. The ring slid onto her finger. That antique sapphire, heavy with generations of Blackwell history, pressed against her skin like a brand. Elena stared at it, this beautiful prison she had willingly locked around herself. and felt Nathan's gaze on her face. She didn't look up. The judge pronounced them married. There was no kiss. 2 hours later, Elena stood in the penthouse that was now supposedly her home and wondered if she had made the worst mistake of her life. The place was obscene. 63 floors above Manhattan, walls of glass revealing the city in every direction, furniture that looked more like art than anything meant to be sat upon. The kitchen alone was bigger than her entire Brooklyn apartment. Everything was gray and white and cold, beautiful in the way that museums were beautiful, impressive but impossible to touch. George, the butler who had introduced himself with a formal nod and kind eyes, had shown her to her room. Her room, separate from Nathan's. That at least was a relief she hadn't dared hope for. "Mr. Blackwell thought you might appreciate your privacy," George had said, as if reading her mind. "He asked me to assure you that he has no expectations beyond the public appearance of this marriage." No expectations. Elena had almost laughed. Men like Nathan Blackwell always had expectations. They just didn't announce them until it was too late to run. She was standing by the window watching the sun set over a city that had never felt more foreign, when she heard him enter. "You haven't unpacked?" Elena didn't turn around. She could see his reflection in the glass, a dark silhouette against the light. "I don't have much to unpack. We can fix that. Tomorrow I'll have someone take you shopping, whatever you need. I don't need your money. You're my wife." The word sent something sharp through her chest. "What's mine is yours now." That was the agreement. Finally, she turned. Nathan stood in the doorway of her room, jacket gone, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that she absolutely did not notice. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. The controlled perfection from the courthouse was cracking just a little, and somehow that made him more dangerous. "The agreement," Elena said slowly, "was that I give you 1 year and you save my father. That's it. I'm not going to pretend this is something it isn't." Nathan's jaw tightened. "And what do you think this is?" "A business arrangement." She lifted her chin. "You bought me, Mr. Blackwell. Don't expect me to be grateful for the cage." Something flickered in those winter eyes. Pain, maybe. Or anger. Or something else entirely. Something she couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. "I didn't buy you," he said quietly. "Then what would you call it?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a keycard which he set on the dresser beside the door. "This opens every door in the building. The penthouse, the private elevator, the rooftop garden. You're not a prisoner here, Elena. You can come and go as you please." He paused. "I only ask that you're present for public events. Dinners, galas, the performances that will make this marriage look real." Performances. The word tasted bitter on her tongue. "Yes." He held her gaze. "I'm very good at performing. I suspect you are too." The silence stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. Elena became suddenly aware of how close he was, how the fading light caught the angles of his face, how his eyes kept dropping to her mouth before snapping back up as if he couldn't help himself. She took a step back, then another, until her shoulders hit the cold glass of the window, and there was nowhere else to go. Nathan noticed. Of course he did. He noticed everything. "Dinner's at 8, he said, his voice rougher than before. "George will show you to the dining room unless you'd prefer to eat alone." "Alone," Elena said immediately. "I'd prefer alone." Something shuddered in his expression. That crack in his control sealed itself, and the cold billionaire was back, untouchable and unreadable. "As you wish, Mrs. Blackwell." He left without another word. Elena stood frozen by the window, her heart pounding against her ribs, the sapphire ring burning on her finger like a question she didn't know how to answer. She told herself the trembling in her hands was anger. She told herself the heat in her cheeks was humiliation. She told herself that the way he looked at her like she was oxygen and he had been drowning for years meant nothing. She was very good at lying to herself. But even she knew this lie wouldn't last. The first week was a careful choreography of avoidance. Nathan left for work before dawn. Elena heard him sometimes, the soft click of his door, the muffled sound of his footsteps passing her room. She would lie in bed, barely breathing, waiting until silence returned before allowing herself to move. Evenings were worse. He came home late, always late, but somehow they kept finding each other in the kitchen, in the hallway, in the living room with its wall of windows and its view of a city that watched them like an audience. They didn't speak beyond pleasantries. Good morning. Good evening. How was your day? Empty words, safe words, the kind of words that built walls instead of bridges. But the looks were something else entirely. Elena would catch him staring when he thought she wasn't paying attention. At breakfast, his eyes would trace the curve of her neck above her robe. At dinner, his gaze would linger on her hands, on the ring he had placed there, on the way she unconsciously twisted it when she was nervous. And she was always nervous now. Around him, her body seemed to forget the rules. Her pulse would quicken. Her skin would flush. The air would thicken until every breath felt like a battle. She hated it. She hated him. She hated the way he made her feel like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, one wrong step away from falling into something she couldn't name. On the seventh night, everything changed. On the seventh night, Elena couldn't sleep. The penthouse was too quiet, too vast, too full of shadows that seemed to breathe. She had grown up in small apartments where the walls held you close, where you could hear your neighbors fighting about bills and your father humming old Portuguese songs in the kitchen. This place felt like floating in space, beautiful and terrifying and impossibly alone. At 2 a.m, she gave up pretending. She slipped out of bed, pulled a thin robe over her silk nightgown, and padded barefoot through the darkened hallway. The marble floors were cold beneath her feet. The city glittered beyond the windows like scattered diamonds, indifferent to her restlessness. She found the piano by accident. It was tucked in a corner of the living room she hadn't explored, a Steinway grand in glossy black, its lid closed as if it had been waiting for someone to wake it. Elena stopped breathing. Her fingers tingled with muscle memory. With years of practice she had abandoned when Juilliard became impossible and survival became the only song worth playing. She shouldn't. It was the middle of the night. Nathan was somewhere in this labyrinth of glass and stone, probably sleeping, probably dreaming of whatever billionaires dreamed about. But her hands were already lifting the lid. Her body was already sliding onto the bench. And before she could talk herself out of it, her fingers found the keys. Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major, the first piece her mother had ever taught her. The notes spilled out like water, like tears, like all the things she had been holding inside since the day she signed her life away. Elena closed her eyes and let the music carry her somewhere else. Somewhere her father wasn't sick and her mother wasn't dead, and she wasn't married to a stranger who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. She didn't hear him approach. She didn't know he was there until the final note faded into silence and she opened her eyes to find Nathan standing at the edge of the room, watching her with an expression that made her forget how to breathe. He wore only pajama pants, low on his hips, his chest bare and sculpted in the moonlight that poured through the windows. His hair was disheveled from sleep. His eyes were dark, almost black in the shadows, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. "Don't stop," he said. His voice was rough, stripped of its usual control. "Please." Elena's hands trembled above the keys. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." He took a step closer, then another. "I don't sleep much. Haven't for years." A pause. "But I've never heard anything like that. Like you." She should say something sharp. Something that would rebuild the walls between them, remind them both that this was a transaction, nothing more. But the way he was looking at her made words impossible. He was looking at her like she had just shown him something sacred, something precious, something he wanted to protect with his bare hands. "My mother taught me," Elena heard herself say. "When I was 5. She said music was the only honest language, that you could lie with words but never with notes. Nathan stopped at the edge of the piano, his fingers resting on the polished surface. What happened to her? The question was soft. Careful, as if he already knew it would hurt. Cancer. When I was 8. Elena's throat tightened. She played this piece the night before she died. I sat beside her on the bench and she told me that as long as I could play, she would never really be gone. Silence fell between them, heavy and fragile. Then Nathan did something she never expected. He walked around the piano, slow and deliberate, and sat down on the bench beside her. Not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of his skin, smell that cedar scent that haunted her dreams, sense the rise and fall of his breathing. Teach me, he said. Elena blinked. What? Teach me to play. He was staring at the keys, not at her, but his voice held something raw. I've owned this piano for 3 years. I bought it because it was beautiful and expensive, and that's what people like me do. We buy beautiful, expensive things and let them gather dust. He turned his head and suddenly his face was inches from hers. I don't want to be that person anymore, not with you. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Nathan, one song. His eyes searched hers. Just teach me one song, something your mother would have liked. Elena didn't know why she agreed. Later, she would blame the late hour, the moonlight, the way grief and loneliness had softened her defenses. But in that moment, she simply took his hand and placed it on the keys. His skin was warm. His fingers were longer than hers, rougher, but they followed her guidance with a gentleness that contradicted everything she thought she knew about him. Here, she murmured, positioning his thumb. This is middle C. Everything starts from here. They sat like that for an hour, maybe longer. Elena taught him the basics, simple scales and finger positions, and watched as this man who controlled empires struggled to produce a single clean note. He was terrible. Truly, laughably terrible. But he kept trying, his brow furrowed in concentration, his jaw set with determination. And somewhere in the midst of his fumbling attempts, Elena felt something inside her crack. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress her or seduce her or win some game she didn't understand. He was just present, vulnerable, human. When he finally produced something resembling a melody, his face lit up with a smile that transformed him completely. The cold, calculating billionaire vanished, replaced by someone younger, softer, someone who looked at her with such unguarded joy that Elena forgot to protect herself. I did it, he said, like a child who had just learned to ride a bicycle. You did, she whispered. And then, without thinking, she smiled back. Nathan's breath caught. His eyes dropped to her mouth, lingered there for one endless moment, then slowly traveled back up to meet her gaze. The air between them changed, thickened, became something electric and dangerous. Elena. Her name in his mouth was a prayer, a warning, a question. She should pull away. She should remember who he was, what he had done, why she was here. But his face was so close and his eyes held something that looked terrifyingly like hope, and her body was leaning toward him before her mind could object. The kiss never happened. The elevator chimed. They sprang apart like teenagers caught by their parents. Elena's heart was racing, her cheeks burning, her entire body trembling with something that might have been relief or disappointment or both. Marcus Chen stepped out of the elevator, looking rumpled and exhausted and completely oblivious to what he had interrupted. Nate, we have a problem. The Singapore deal is falling apart and... He stopped, finally noticing Elena in her silk robe, Nathan shirtless beside her, the piano between them like a confession. His eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Oh, am I interrupting something? No, Elena said quickly, already standing, already retreating. I was just leaving. Good night. She didn't look back as she fled to her room. She didn't see the expression on Nathan's face, the way his hands clenched at his sides. the way he watched her disappear as if she had taken all the air in the room with her. But she felt his gaze on her back like a brand, and she knew with a certainty that terrified her that something had changed between them that could never be unchanged. The days that followed were an exquisite torture. The walls Elena had so carefully constructed were crumbling, and she couldn't seem to stop the collapse. Nathan didn't push. He didn't mention the almost kiss, didn't pressure her, didn't do anything except exist in the same space as her, with a patience that somehow made everything worse. But now she noticed things she had tried to ignore. The way he always poured her coffee first at breakfast. The way fresh flowers appeared in her room every morning, different each day, as if someone was paying attention to which ones made her smile. The way his voice softened when he said her name, like it was something precious he was afraid of breaking. She noticed the small kindnesses, the medical bills that vanished, the specialist who suddenly became available for her father, the rehabilitation center that had a mysterious opening just when Richard needed it most. Nathan never mentioned any of it, never asked for gratitude, but Elena knew. She saw the receipts that George accidentally left on the kitchen counter. She saw the emails on the tablet Nathan forgot to lock. He was taking care of her family without expecting anything in return, and slowly, against her will, it was unraveling her. 2 weeks after the piano incident, Elena was curled on the couch reading when Nathan came home early. She heard the elevator, then his footsteps, then silence. When she looked up, he was standing in the doorway, staring at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing." But he didn't move. "I just wasn't expecting you to be here. Where else would I be?" Something flickered in his eyes. "Anywhere else. This marriage, this arrangement, it's not a prison. You don't have to stay inside these walls waiting for me." Elena set her book aside. "I'm not waiting for you." "Then what are you doing?" It was a simple question, but the way he asked it, like her answer genuinely mattered, like he genuinely wanted to understand her, made her throat tight. "I'm reading," she said. "I'm existing. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not working 2 jobs and drowning in my father's debt." She paused. "This is the first time in 8 years I've had space to breathe. I don't know what to do with it." Nathan crossed the room slowly, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. He sat on the opposite end of the couch, careful to maintain distance, and looked at her with those winter eyes that didn't seem so cold anymore. "What did you want?" he asked. "Before everything fell apart, what did you dream of becoming?" No one had asked her that in years. Not even Carrie. The question hit her like a blow to the chest. "A pianist," she admitted. "Concert halls. Recording studios. I wanted to play for people who needed music the way I needed it. People who were broken and searching and desperate for something beautiful." She laughed bitterly. "Stupid dream." "It's not stupid. It's dead. Dreams require money, Nathan. They require time and opportunity and a father who doesn't need you to save him." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was so low she almost didn't hear it. "My father used to tell me that dreams were distractions, that successful people didn't waste time wanting things. They took them." He stared at the window, at the city lights blurring in the darkness. "I spent my whole life following that philosophy, taking what I wanted, never asking, never waiting, never hoping, and it made me rich, it made me powerful." He turned to face her. "It also made me the kind of man who manipulates a woman into marriage because he doesn't know how to simply ask her to dinner." Elena's heart stopped. "What did you say?" Nathan held her gaze. The mask he always wore, that careful construction of control and composure, was slipping. She could see something raw underneath, something wounded and honest and terrifying. "I know you think I did this for leverage, for power, for whatever twisted reason billionaires do the things they do." He leaned forward slightly. "But, Elena, I need you to understand something. I need you to hear me when I say this." She couldn't breathe. "Say what?" "I first saw you 3 years ago." The words hung in the air like smoke. 3 years? Nathan nodded slowly. It was at a concert. You were playing at a small venue in the village, some charity event I didn't want to attend. I was there for 20 minutes, just long enough to make an appearance and leave. But then you walked onto that stage. You sat at that piano, and you played. His voice cracked. He didn't seem to notice. I have never in my life heard anything so beautiful. You played like the music was coming from somewhere inside you, like it was your heartbeat made audible. And when you finished, when you stood and smiled at that tiny audience, I realized I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I could barely remember my own name. Elena's hands were trembling. The ring on her finger felt suddenly heavier. I tried to meet you afterward, Nathan continued. But you were gone. Vanished before I could find you. All I had was your name, spoken once by someone introducing you, Elena Vasconcelos. I told myself it was nothing, an infatuation, a moment of weakness. I told myself I would forget. He looked at her, and his eyes were bright with something she had never seen there before. Vulnerability, fear, hope. I never forgot. I couldn't. For 3 years I watched you from a distance. I learned everything about you, your life, your struggles, your father's debts. I told myself I was just curious, just interested. But the truth, he swallowed hard. The truth is that I was falling in love with a woman I had never met. And when I finally saw an opportunity to be close to you, to know you, to have you in my life, I took it. I took it because I'm selfish and desperate, and I didn't know how else to make you see me. Silence. Elena stared at him, her mind reeling, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. You orchestrated this, she whispered. My father's debts, the timing, all of it. Nathan didn't look away. Your father was already in trouble. I didn't create his problems, Elena, but I saw them and I used them. I found a way to be his solution because being his solution meant I could finally be close to you. She should be furious. She should scream at him, slap him, walk out of this gilded cage and never look back. He had manipulated her, used her, treated her life like a chess game where he controlled all the pieces. But the way he was looking at her, he wasn't proud of what he had done. He wasn't justifying it or defending it. He was confessing, laying himself bare, giving her the weapon she needed to destroy him. Why are you telling me this? She asked, her voice barely audible. Because I can't pretend anymore. Nathan's hand moved toward her, then stopped, hovering in the space between them. Because every day in this apartment, watching you, being near you, falling deeper when I was already in too far, it's killing me. And you deserve to know the truth. Even if the truth makes you hate me. I should hate you. Yes. I should walk out that door and never come back. Yes. I should feel violated and betrayed and furious. Yes. Elena stood. Nathan didn't move, just watched her with those eyes that held nothing back anymore, waiting for the verdict he clearly believed he deserved. She walked to the window. The city sprawled beneath them, millions of lives unfolding in the darkness. And here she was, trapped in a tower with a man who had just admitted to loving her for 3 years without her knowing. 3 years? She said to the glass. You loved me for 3 years. Yes. And you never once thought to just introduce yourself? Say hello? Ask me to coffee like a normal person? A sound behind her that might have been a laugh or a sob. I thought about it every day. But you were so far above me, Elena. So talented and passionate and real. And I was just this. A man made of money and manipulation who had forgotten how to want things honestly. I convinced myself you would never look at me twice, that the only way to have you was to find another way. She turned back to face him. He looked wrecked, devastated, like a man who had just ripped out his own heart and handed it to someone who might crush it. You were wrong, Elena said quietly. Nathan's breath caught. What? That night at the gala, before you ever approached me, before I knew who you were or what you wanted. She took a step toward him. I noticed you first. Across that room, out of 300 people, my eyes found you, and I couldn't look away. She watched the words hit him. Watched hope bloom in those winter eyes like spring arriving after an endless cold. Elena, I'm not saying I forgive you. Another step. I'm not saying I understand. What you did was manipulative and wrong, and if you ever try to control my life again, I will destroy you with my own hands. I know. But I'm also not saying I hate you. She stopped in front of him, close enough to touch. Because I don't. I've tried. God, I've tried so hard. But every time I look at you, every time you say my name, every time I catch you watching me like I'm something miraculous. She shook her head. I don't hate you, Nathan. I don't know what I feel. But it isn't hate. He rose slowly, carefully, as if afraid she might shatter. They stood facing each other, inches apart, the city glittering behind them like an audience holding its breath. I don't deserve you, Nathan whispered. I know that. I've always known that. But if you give me a chance, if you let me try. His hand rose to her face, trembling, and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. I will spend the rest of my life earning what I stole. I will court you properly. I will ask instead of take. I will become the kind of man who deserves to stand beside you. Elena's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Start now, she said. What? Ask me. Whatever it is you wanted from the beginning, ask me properly. Nathan's hand cradled her face. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made the world disappear. Elena Vasconcelos, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Will you have dinner with me? Tomorrow night. A real date. No contracts, no obligations. Just you and me and the terrifying possibility of something real. She should make him wait. She should make him suffer. She should punish him for every manipulation, every scheme, every moment he had controlled her life without her knowledge. But the way he was looking at her. Yes, Elena whispered. And when he kissed her, finally gently, like she was something precious he was afraid of breaking, she stopped trying to convince herself that she didn't want this. She wanted this. She wanted him. And for the first time since her mother died, she let herself want something without fear. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. Nathan courted her like a man possessed, like someone determined to prove that love could be rebuilt from the ashes of manipulation. Every morning, she woke to handwritten notes slipped under her door, small confessions and observations that made her heart ache with their sincerity. He noticed things no one else ever had, the way she hummed while making coffee, the crease between her brows when she read something troubling, the specific shade of amber her eyes turned in afternoon light. He took her to dinner at restaurants where the menus had no prices, but also to hole-in-the-wall noodle shops in Chinatown, where he rolled up his sleeves and laughed when broth splashed on his $1,000 shirt. He sat beside her at the piano every night, fumbling through scales with the same determination he brought to boardroom negotiations, cursing under his breath when his fingers betrayed him, and grinning like a child when he finally strung together a passable melody. He was trying, genuinely, desperately trying, and despite every voice in her head screaming that this was too fast, too much, too dangerous, Elena found herself falling. It happened in small moments. The way he remembered that she took her tea with honey, never sugar. The way he stood behind her at parties, his hand warm on the small of her back, his presence a shield against the curious stares and whispered speculations. The way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, like she was the sun and he had spent his entire life in darkness. One night, a month after his confession, Elena found herself in his bedroom, not for the reason the tabloids would have assumed. Nathan had shown her a photo album, old and worn, filled with pictures of his childhood. His grandmother, the woman who had worn the sapphire ring before it sat on Elena's finger. His father, stern-faced and cold even in family portraits. His mother, beautiful but distant, her smile never reaching her eyes. She left when I was 12, Nathan said quietly, tracing the edge of a photograph where a young boy with dark hair and serious eyes stood alone in an enormous garden. My father told me it was because she was weak. That love made people weak, and Blackwells couldn't afford weakness. Elena leaned against his shoulder, feeling the tension in his body, the old wounds that still bled beneath the surface. And you believed him? For 20 years. He turned to look at her, and his eyes held something fragile. Until you. Until I realized that feeling something for another person didn't make me weak. It made me terrified. And there's a difference. She kissed him then, soft and slow. A promise she wasn't sure she was ready to make but couldn't seem to stop offering. Nathan's hands cradled her face like she was made of glass, and when they finally pulled apart, he pressed his forehead to hers and whispered her name like a prayer. They didn't sleep together that night, but Elena stayed, curled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat until the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. And when she woke, his arms still around her, his breath warm against her hair, she realized with startling clarity that she was no longer pretending. She loved him. Against all logic, against all reason, she had fallen in love with Nathan Blackwell. And that was when everything fell apart. It started with a phone call. Elena was visiting her father at the rehabilitation center, watching him take slow, careful steps down the hallway, when Carrie's name flashed on her screen. She almost ignored it. Her father was smiling for the first time in months, and she didn't want to miss a moment. But something made her answer. Elena. Carrie's voice was strange, tight, wrong. Where are you? With my dad. Why? What's going on? A pause. Then, I need you to come to my apartment. Now. Don't tell Nathan where you're going. Ice crawled up Elena's spine. Carrie, you're scaring me. I know, I'm sorry. But there's something you need to see. Something I found. Another pause, longer this time. It's about how Nathan really got your father into debt in the first place. The world tilted. What are you talking about? My father's company failed because... Your father's company failed because someone made it fail. Someone bought his suppliers out from under him. Someone spread rumors that destroyed his credit. Someone methodically, systematically dismantled everything he had built until the only option left was bankruptcy. Carrie's voice cracked. Elena, I have the documents, I have emails. Nathan didn't just take advantage of your father's situation, he created it. Elena couldn't breathe. The hallway was too bright, too loud, her father's voice a distant echo as he asked if she was all right. I'll be there in an hour, she heard herself say. The drive to Carrie's apartment was a blur. Elena's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white, her mind racing through every moment, every confession, every tender word Nathan had spoken. He had admitted to using her father's debt. He had confessed to manipulating the situation. But he had also said he didn't create the problems, only exploited them. He had lied. If what Carrie was saying was true, he had lied about everything. Carrie's apartment was small and cluttered, filled with secondhand furniture and plants that somehow thrived despite her chaotic schedule. She was waiting at the door, her usually bright face pale and drawn, a manila folder clutched in her hands. Before I show you this, Carrie said, I need you to know that I'm only doing this because I love you. Because you're my best friend, and you deserve the truth, even if the truth destroys everything. Elena took the folder. Her hands were steady, even though her heart was shattering. Inside were documents, dozens of them, emails between Nathan and various business associates dated 3 years ago, financial records showing shell companies acquiring key suppliers for Vasconcelos Industries, bank statements tracing payments to journalists who had written damaging articles about her father's business practices. A timeline, meticulously constructed, showing how Nathan Blackwell had spent 18 months destroying Richard Vasconcelos's empire before swooping in as his savior. One email stood out. It was addressed to Marcus Chen, dated 6 months before the charity gala where Elena and Nathan had first locked eyes. The Vasconcelos situation is proceeding as planned. Bankruptcy filing expected within the quarter. Once Richard is desperate enough, I'll make my move. The daughter won't have a choice. She'll have to accept whatever offer I make. It's the only way to get close to her. Elena read the words 3 times. Then she set the folder down, walked to Carrie's bathroom, and vomited. When she emerged, her best friend was crying. "How did you get these?" Elena's voice didn't sound like her own. "Marcus." Carrie wiped her eyes. "We've been seeing each other. He didn't know I was your friend at first, and by the time he found out, things had gotten complicated. He's been carrying this guilt for months. He finally broke down and told me everything. He said Nathan was different now, that falling for you had changed him. But I couldn't." She shook her head. "You had to know. You deserved to know." Elena stared at the folder on the table. All those documents, all that evidence of a man who had systematically destroyed her family so he could play hero, so he could buy her like a commodity. "He told me he didn't create the problems," Elena whispered. "He looked me in the eyes and said he only used what was already there." "He lied." "Yes." The word was hollow. "He lied." She picked up the folder, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the door. "What are you going to do?" Carrie asked. Elena didn't answer. She didn't know. All she knew was that the man she had fallen in love with, the man she had trusted with her wounded heart, had built their entire relationship on a foundation of calculated destruction. And he was going to answer for it. The penthouse was dark when Elena arrived. Late afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor, turning the sleek furniture into something ominous. She didn't turn on the lights. She just sat on the couch where Nathan had confessed his love, the folder in her lap, and waited. He came home at 7, earlier than usual, calling her name as he stepped off the elevator. "Elena, I thought we could try that Thai place you mentioned, the one with the—" He stopped when he saw her. Something in her expression must have warned him because the smile died on his face. "What's wrong?" She held up the folder. Nathan's eyes fixed on it, and she watched the color drain from his skin. Not confusion, not surprise. Recognition. Horror. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" Elena's voice was ice. "It's real, isn't it? Every email, every transaction, every calculated move you made to destroy my father so you could swoop in and save us. It's all real." Nathan didn't move. He stood frozen in the middle of the room, his chest rising and falling too fast, his hands clenched at his sides. "Elena, please. Let me explain." "Explain." She stood, the folder clutched like a weapon. "Explain how you spent 18 months dismantling my father's life. Explain how you bought his suppliers and planted stories and manipulated everything so he would have no choice but to accept your help. Explain how you created the very crisis you pretended to solve." "I never pretended. You lied to me." The words tore from her throat like broken glass. "You sat on this couch and told me you didn't create his problems. You looked into my eyes while I was falling in love with you and you lied." Nathan flinched as if she had struck him. Good. She wanted him to hurt. She wanted him to feel even a fraction of the devastation clawing through her chest. "I was going to tell you," he said, his voice ragged. "I was trying to find the right time." "The right time?" "Nathan, there is no right time to tell someone you destroyed their family because you were obsessed with them." It wasn't obsession. He took a step toward her. She stepped back. "Elena, please. What I did was wrong. I know that. I've known it from the moment I set the plan in motion. But you have to understand." "Understand what?" "That you're a monster who ruined innocent people to get what you wanted." "That I was a monster." His voice cracked. "Was. Before you. Before I actually knew you and realized that the woman I had built in my head was nothing compared to the reality." He ran his hands through his hair, destroying its careful perfection. "I started that plan 3 years ago, Elena. When I was still my father's son. When I believed that taking what you wanted was the only way to survive. I didn't know you. I didn't love you. I was infatuated with an idea, a fantasy, and I did terrible things to bring that fantasy to life. And that makes it better? No." He met her eyes, and his were bright with tears she had never seen before. Nothing makes it better. Nothing ever could. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Falling in love with you, the real you, changed everything. I tried to undo the damage I've been trying for months. The investors I scared away from your father's company, I've been quietly bringing them back. The suppliers I bought, I've transferred them to a trust in his name. The rehabilitation center, the medical bills, the specialists. That wasn't charity, Elena. That was penance. That was me trying to repair what I destroyed because I couldn't stand being the reason you suffered. Elena's hands were shaking. The folder trembled in her grip. You expect me to believe that? You expect me to believe anything you say ever again? I expect you to hate me. Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. I expect you to walk out that door and never look back. I expect you to destroy me because that's what I deserve. The only thing I'm asking, the only thing I will ever ask, is that you believe one truth. What truth? He crossed the distance between them, slow and careful, until they stood face to face. This close, she could see every line of anguish on his face, every crack in the armor he had worn his entire life. I love you, he said. That was never a lie. Not from the moment I heard you play. Not from the moment I first saw you smile. I have done terrible, unforgivable things. I have manipulated and schemed and destroyed. But loving you, that was the only honest thing I ever did. Elena stared at him. The man she had fallen for. The man who had wrecked her family and built her a golden cage and somehow, against all odds, found a way into her heart. I don't know who you are, she whispered. Neither do I. A tear slid down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. But I'm trying to find out. I'm trying to become someone worthy of you. And if you leave, his voice broke. If you leave, I'll spend the rest of my life becoming that person anyway. Because you showed me it was possible. You showed me that I could feel something real. She should leave. Every rational part of her brain screamed to walk away, to take the evidence and expose him, to burn his empire to the ground the way he had burned her father's. But her feet wouldn't move. I need time, Elena heard herself say. I need space. I need to think about everything without you looking at me like that. Nathan nodded slowly. Whatever you need, however long you need. I'll be here. Don't wait for me. I've been waiting for you my entire life, Elena. His smile was sad, resigned, devastated. A few more weeks, months, years, it doesn't matter. I'll wait forever if that's what it takes. She turned away before he could see her cry. That night, Elena checked into a hotel. She didn't tell Nathan where. She didn't tell anyone. She just lay in a strange bed in a strange room, clutching the sapphire ring she couldn't bring herself to remove, and let herself shatter. She cried for her father, whose ruin had been orchestrated by the man she loved. She cried for her mother, who had taught her that music never lied but had never warned her about the silence between notes. She cried for herself, for the woman who had dared to hope and been betrayed, for the girl who had sold herself to save her family only to discover the buyer had created the price. And somewhere in the depths of her grief, she cried for Nathan, for the boy who had been taught that love was weakness, for the man who had twisted that lesson into something monstrous, for the soul that was trying, desperately and too late, to find its way back to humanity. She didn't sleep. She just lay there, watching the city lights blur through her tears, and wondered if love could survive what he had done. 3 days passed. Elena spent them walking, through Central Park, where couples held hands, and children laughed, and life continued as if her world hadn't ended. Through the Brooklyn streets of her childhood, past the apartment where her mother had taught her to play, past the restaurant where she had worked double shifts to keep her father alive. Through memories and grief and questions that had no answers. On the 4th day, she went to see her father. Richard was sitting in the garden of the rehabilitation center, his face turned toward the sun, looking healthier than he had in years. When he saw Elena approaching, his whole body lit up with a smile that reminded her of better times. "My girl," he said, reaching for her hands. "I was hoping you'd come. I wanted to thank you." Elena sat beside him, her heart heavy. "Thank me for what?" "For everything." He squeezed her fingers. "For not giving up on me. For marrying that man even though I know, sweetheart, that you didn't want to. For sacrificing your happiness so your foolish old father could have a second chance." Tears burned in Elena's eyes. "Dad, I know I failed you." Richard's voice trembled. "I know I lost everything and put you in an impossible position. But watching you these past few weeks, seeing you laugh again, seeing you play again." He shook his head, wonder in his eyes. "You're happy, Elena. For the first time since your mother died, you're actually happy. And even if the circumstances are wrong, even if this isn't the life you would have chosen, I can't regret any of it, because my daughter is finally living again." Elena couldn't speak. The truth sat heavy on her tongue, the truth about what Nathan had done, about how her father's downfall had been engineered, about the foundation of lies beneath everything. But looking at her father's face, at the hope and love and fragile peace she found there, she couldn't bring herself to shatter it. "I love you, Dad," she whispered instead. "I love you too, sweetheart." He kissed her forehead. "Now, go home to your husband. Whatever problems you're having, and don't think I don't know something's wrong, they're not worth losing what you found." Elena walked away with her father's words echoing in her mind. Home, husband, what she'd found. The question wasn't whether Nathan had done unforgivable things. He had. The question was whether he was still that man. Whether the person who had held her through nightmares and learned piano just to be close to her and looked at her like she hung the stars, whether that person was real or just another manipulation. And there was only one way to find out. Elena returned to the penthouse on a Thursday evening, when the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the city below hummed with the energy of a million lives unfolding. She didn't call ahead. She didn't announce herself. She simply stepped off the elevator and walked into the space that had become, against all odds, something close to home. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. She found him in the room with the piano. Nathan sat on the bench, his back to the door, his fingers resting on keys he wasn't playing. He wore the same clothes she had last seen him in 4 days ago, wrinkled now, the sleeves of his shirt rolled haphazardly to his elbows. His hair was disheveled. His shoulders were hunched. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out and left to crumble. Elena's heart clenched despite everything. "You haven't slept," she said. Nathan's entire body went rigid. For a long moment he didn't turn around. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw, scraped down to something barely human. "I didn't think you were coming back." "Neither did I." Slowly, carefully, as if sudden movement might make her disappear, Nathan turned on the bench to face her. The sight of him stole her breath. His eyes were red-rimmed, shadowed with exhaustion. His jaw was covered in days of stubble. But it was the expression on his face that undid her. Hope and terror warring for dominance, neither willing to surrender. "Elena." Her name was a prayer, a plea, a broken thing he was offering up to whatever God might listen. "I'm so sorry, I know." She held up her hand, stopping him. "I didn't come here to hear you apologize again." "Then why did you come?" Elena crossed the room slowly, her heels clicking against the marble, her heart pounding against her ribs. She stopped a few feet from the piano bench, close enough to touch him but choosing not to. "Not yet. I came to ask you questions," she said. "And I need you to answer them honestly. No deflection, no excuses. Just truth." Nathan nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. "Anything. When you started your plan to destroy my father's company, did you know what it would do to me? Did you know I would have to drop out of Juilliard? Did you know I would spend years working double shifts and selling my mother's jewelry and watching my father wither away?" The words hit him like physical blows. She watched him absorb each one, watched the guilt carve deeper lines into his face. "No," he said quietly. "At the beginning, I didn't think about you as a real person with a real life. You were an obsession, a goal, something I wanted to possess because wanting things and taking them was the only way I knew how to exist." He paused, his voice cracking. "By the time I understood what I was actually doing to you, the damage was already done, and I was too much of a coward to stop, too afraid that if I walked away, I would never have another chance. So you kept going, even knowing you were destroying us." "Yes." The word was barely a whisper. "I told myself I would make it right eventually, that once I had you, once you were part of my life, I would fix everything. I would be the hero instead of the villain." He laughed bitterly. "But there's no fixing what I did. I know that now. There's only living with it." Elena studied him, this man who had orchestrated her family's ruin and then tried to rebuild them from the rubble. This man who had manipulated his way into her life and then fallen genuinely, desperately in love with her. This man who looked at her like she was oxygen and he had been drowning for 32 years. "Second question," she said. "All those things you did after we got married, the medical bills, the specialists, the rehabilitation center, secretly returning my father's investors, did you do those things because you were trying to buy my forgiveness, or because you actually cared?" Nathan rose from the bench, standing before her with his hands at his sides, making no move to touch her. "I did them because I couldn't stand being the reason you suffered," he said. "Because watching you worry about your father, watching you carry burdens you should never have had to carry, made me want to tear my own heart out. I didn't expect you to find out. I didn't want credit or gratitude, I just wanted—" He trailed off, searching for words. "I wanted to undo what I had done, even knowing it was impossible, even knowing nothing could ever erase the damage. And the piano lessons, the dates, the way you held me like I was precious?" Something shifted in Nathan's eyes, something raw and unguarded and desperately sincere. "Those weren't penance, Elena. Those were just me, falling deeper every single day. Learning piano because I wanted to understand something you loved. Taking you to dinner because I wanted to see you smile. Holding you because—" His voice broke. "Because being close to you was the only time I felt like I might actually be worth something. Like I might be more than just a monster wearing a man's skin." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything spoken and unspoken. Elena reached into her pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. Nathan's eyes tracked the movement, confusion flickering across his face. "I went to see a lawyer yesterday," she said. "A very expensive one who was more than happy to review the evidence against you. He said I have enough to destroy you. Criminal charges, civil suits, your reputation, your company, your entire empire. I could burn it all to the ground." Nathan didn't flinch. "I know. He also said that if I wanted a divorce, I could have one within 60 days. Full settlement. Everything I'm entitled to under the prenuptial agreement plus damages for emotional distress." She paused. "I would never have to see you again." "I know." Nathan's voice was steady, but his hands had begun to tremble. "Do it. If that's what you need to heal, Elena, do it. I won't fight you. I won't contest anything. Just—" He swallowed hard. "Just know that whatever happens, I meant what I said. I love you. I've loved you since before I knew what love actually meant. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of having felt that, even if I never see you again." Elena unfolded the paper. Then slowly, deliberately, she tore it in half. Nathan's breath caught. His eyes widened. He stared at the torn document, then at her face, disbelief and hope warring in his expression. "What? I'm not going to destroy you," Elena said. "And I'm not going to divorce you." She let the pieces fall to the floor. "Not because you deserve forgiveness, not because what you did was okay, but because I spent 4 days trying to convince myself that I could walk away from you. And I couldn't. Elena, I'm furious with you." She took a step closer. "I'm hurt and betrayed, and there are moments when I look at you and see the man who ruined my family. But there are also moments when I look at you and see the man who sat beside me at that piano at 2 in the morning, learning scales like his life depended on it. The man who remembered that I take honey in my tea. The man who cried when he told me the truth because he knew he was losing the only thing that ever mattered to him. Tears were streaming down Nathan's face now. He made no move to wipe them away. I don't know how to reconcile those two versions of you, Elena continued. I don't know if I'll ever fully trust you again, but I know that when I imagined my life without you, when I thought about walking away and never coming back, it felt like losing something essential. Like cutting out a piece of my own heart. She reached up, her hand trembling, and pressed her palm against his chest. Beneath her fingers, his heart was pounding, wild and desperate and alive. I'm not ready to lose you, she whispered, even though part of me thinks I should be. Nathan's hand came up to cover hers, pressing it harder against his chest, as if he needed her to feel exactly how much she affected him. What do you want? He asked, his voice rough with emotion. Tell me what you need, Elena. I'll do anything. Give you space, go to therapy, sign over everything I own, whatever it takes to prove that I'm not that man anymore, that I will never be that man again. I want you to stop trying to fix things by yourself. Elena met his eyes. I want you to let me in even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly. I want you to trust me with the truth, always. Even when the truth might make me hate you. Done. I want you to rebuild my father's company. Not behind my back, not as some secret penance, but openly, with his knowledge. Let him be part of restoring what he lost. Done. And I want... Her voice wavered. She steadied it. I want you to ask me again. Nathan blinked. Ask you what? Ask me to marry you. She pulled her hand from his chest and held it up, the sapphire ring catching the fading light. Not because of contracts or manipulation or debts that needed paying. Ask me because you love me and I love you, and this time, I want to say yes because I mean it. For a long moment, Nathan just stared at her. Then, slowly, he sank to his knees. Right there on the cold marble floor, in his wrinkled clothes with his unshaven face and his red-rimmed eyes, Nathan Blackwell knelt before her like a man offering everything he had to a woman who could still choose to destroy him. Elena Vasconcelos, he said, his voice shaking. I have loved you since the first moment I heard you play. I have loved you through years of distance and months of proximity and 4 days of hell, not knowing if I would ever see you again. I have done terrible things to get close to you, and I will spend the rest of my life atoning for them. But if you give me the chance, if you choose me, knowing everything I am and everything I've done, I swear to you that I will never stop trying to be worthy of that choice. He reached for her hand, his fingers trembling as they wrapped around hers. Will you marry me? Not for your father, not for money, not because you have no other option. His eyes shone with tears and hope and something that looked like prayer. Marry me because you want to, because you love me, because you believe that two broken people might be able to build something whole together. Elena looked down at him. This man who had destroyed her world and then remade it, who had manipulated his way into her life, and then handed her all the weapons she needed to end him. This man who knelt at her feet like she was something sacred, offering her a love that had started as obsession and grown into something painfully, beautifully real. She thought about her mother, who had taught her that music was the only honest language. She thought about the Chopin nocturne that had filled this room the night everything began to change. She thought about honesty and forgiveness, and the terrifying possibility of choosing love over safety. Then she sank to her knees in front of him. Yes, she said. Nathan made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. His hands came up to cup her face, and he kissed her with all the desperation and relief and overwhelming love of a man who had been drowning and finally found shore. When they broke apart, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air, Elena felt something shift in her chest. The anger wasn't gone. Maybe it never would be completely. The hurt still lingered in the shadows, waiting for quiet moments to remind her of what he had done. But beneath all of that, stronger than all of that, was something else. Something that felt like hope, like beginning. like the first notes of a song she was finally ready to play. "I love you," Nathan whispered against her lips. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Good," Elena whispered back. "Stay terrified. It'll keep you honest." He laughed, a real laugh, the kind she had only heard a handful of times, the kind that transformed his face from cold and controlled to young and open and impossibly beautiful. "I have something for you," he said, pulling back slightly. "I was saving it for our anniversary, but I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to wait for anything when it comes to you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, different from the one that had held the sapphire ring. Older, more worn, like it had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Elena opened it. Inside, nestled against faded silk, was a delicate gold chain with a small pendant, a treble clef, intricately crafted, with a tiny sapphire embedded at its heart. "It belonged to my grandmother," Nathan said softly. "She was a pianist too. My grandfather had it made for her when they were young and poor and had nothing but each other. She wore it every day until she died." He paused. "My mother sold most of her jewelry, but I managed to save this. I've been keeping it, waiting for someone who would understand what it meant." Elena lifted the necklace from the box, watching it catch the light. A treble clef, a sapphire. Music and love intertwined. "She would have loved you," Nathan said. "She would have seen exactly what I see, a woman who turns silence into something beautiful." Elena couldn't speak. She simply handed him the necklace and turned around, lifting her hair so he could fasten it around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, and she shivered. Not from cold, but from the intimacy of the gesture, the trust it required, the promise it represented. When she turned back to face him, the pendant rested against her collarbone, cool and perfect and right. "Thank you," she whispered. Nathan shook his head. "Thank you for staying, for fighting, for giving me something I never thought I deserved." "You don't deserve it," Elena said, but she was smiling. "Not yet, but you will. We'll get there together." She stood, offering him her hand. He took it, rising to his feet, and they stood together in the room where everything had changed, where she had played Chopin in the moonlight, and he had asked to learn, where they had almost kissed before the world interrupted, where a marriage of convenience had slowly, impossibly, transformed into something real. "What now?" Nathan asked. Elena looked at the piano, at the windows with their view of a city full of stories, at the man beside her whose eyes held her reflection like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen. "Now," she said, "you sit down at that piano, and I teach you the rest of that nocturne." Nathan smiled, that rare, brilliant smile that made him look like someone who had finally found his way home. And then, Elena leaned up and kissed him, soft and slow, a promise of all the years stretching out before them. "And then," she murmured against his lips, "we see what kind of song we can make together." The last light of sunset spilled through the windows as Elena sat beside Nathan on the piano bench, their shoulders touching, their futures intertwined. She placed his hands on the keys, adjusted his fingers, and began to play the opening notes of her mother's favorite nocturne. And this time, when Nathan fumbled through the melody beside her, when his wrong notes clashed with her right ones, when they had to stop and start again and laugh at the chaos they were creating, Elena didn't hear imperfection. She heard something better. She heard the beginning of their song,